My name's Daisy, and this is the story of how I learned that family isn't always blood, and sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. I came into this world as an unwelcome surprise to my parents, fresh out of college with stars in their eyes and careers on their minds. When my mom found out she was pregnant, she wanted an abortion. It wasn't the right time, they weren't ready, all that jazz. But my grandparents had other ideas. See, they were loaded, and they'd been bankrolling my parents' lives. When they caught wind of the pregnancy, they laid down the law: have the baby, or kiss the gravy train goodbye. From day one, I was an afterthought. My mom couldn't wait to get back to work, leaving me with a revolving door of nannies and my grandmothers. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the care they gave me, but it wasn't the same as having real parents. As I grew older, my grandparents started to back off. They'd done their duty, keeping me alive and all, and now they were off to enjoy their golden years in exotic locales. Can't blame them, I guess. But it left me even more alone. By the time I was 7, I was practically raising myself. I knew how to cook basic meals, do my own laundry, and get myself ready for school. It wasn't ideal, but it was my normal. Then, everything changed. My mom got pregnant again. This time, it was different. My parents were ready, excited even. They'd climbed the corporate ladder, made names for themselves. Now they could afford to be parents, or so they thought. When my sister was born, it was like the sun had finally risen in our house. My parents were over the moon, cooing and fawning over her like she was made of gold. And I was pushed even further into the shadows. As the years went by, the difference in how we were treated became more and more obvious. My sister got the best of everything: toys, clothes, attention. If she wanted something, she got it. If she did something wrong, it was brushed off with a laugh and a kids will be kids. Me? I learned not to ask for things. I wore hand-me-downs and made do with what I had. If I screwed up, it was met with disappointment and lectures about responsibility. Don't get me wrong, we weren't poor. Far from it. My parents were doing well, really well. But in their eyes, I was already grown, already independent. Why waste money on me when my sister needed it more? I threw myself into my studies. If I couldn't have their love, I'd have their respect. I got top grades, joined every club I could, stayed out of trouble. But it was never enough. They'd nod absently when I showed them my report card, then turn back to my sister's finger-painting masterpiece. By the time high school rolled around, I was counting the days until I could leave. I applied to colleges in secret, not telling my parents until I'd already been accepted. When I finally got into one of the best colleges, I packed my bags and left without a word. It took them 3 days to notice I was gone. 3 whole days. And even then, it was only because my mom wanted some yogurt. When she called, her voice was casual, like she was asking about the weather. "Daisy, could you pick up some low-calorie yogurt from the health food store on your way home?" I almost laughed. Here I was, starting a new chapter of my life, and all she cared about was yogurt. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not at home. I've been at college for 3 days now. I'm living in the dorms." There was a moment of silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to process this information. Then, without a hint of remorse or concern, she said, "Oh. Well, if you come back, you'll have to stay at a hotel. We've given your room to your sister." Life at college was a breath of fresh air. But money was tight. My parents didn't offer any financial support. But my grandparents, bless their hearts, came through for me. They sent me small amounts regularly, just enough to keep me afloat. It wasn't much, but it meant everything to me. Not just the money, but the fact that someone in my family actually cared. "Daisy, dear," my grandmother would say during our infrequent phone calls, "we're so proud of you. You focus on your studies, all right? Don't worry about anything else." Those words were like a balm to my soul. I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor, determined not to let them down. I couldn't work part-time like many of my classmates, the course load was too heavy, and I was determined to excel. So I pinched pennies, lived on ramen more often than not, and made every cent count. Meanwhile, life back home continued without me. My sister, the golden child, was struggling in school. Not that it mattered to my parents, they hired the best tutors money could buy, showered her with rewards for the slightest improvement, and made excuses for her every failure. By my senior year, companies were already lining up to recruit me. My professors sang my praises, my resume was impeccable, and I had my pick of job offers. But none of them felt quite right. I wanted more. I wanted to prove to myself, and maybe, just maybe, to my family, that I could make it on my own terms. So I took a leap of faith. I applied to a prestigious international company in Europe. It was a long shot, but I figured I had nothing to lose. When the acceptance email came, I nearly fell out of my chair. This was it. My ticket to a new life, a fresh start. I graduated with honors, my grandparents beaming proudly in the audience. My parents? They sent a generic congratulations card. My sister didn't even bother with that. But I didn't care. I was beyond seeking their approval. As I packed my bags for Europe, I thought about calling my parents to say goodbye. In the end, I decided against it. What was there to say? They'd made it clear where I stood in their lives. Instead, I hugged my grandparents tight, promising to call and write often. Life in Europe was everything I'd hoped for and more. Every now and then, I'd call my parents. Old habits die hard, I guess. But each conversation was like pulling teeth. They'd give monosyllabic answers, always too busy or too distracted to really talk. And they never, not once, called me. Then I met Marco. He was in the marketing department, all charm and quick wit, with a smile that could light up a room. We started as colleagues, became friends, and before I knew it, we were falling in love. When Marco proposed on a moonlit beach in Positano, I didn't hesitate. We decided to have the wedding in Italy. We should go tell your parents in person, Marco said one night as we pored over wedding plans. And invite them properly. It's the right thing to do. So we flew back to the States, armed with wedding invitations and hope. Foolish hope, as it turned out. From the moment we walked into my childhood home, it was clear we weren't welcome. My parents were cold, distracted. They barely looked at Marco, barely acknowledged our news. "Oh, that's nice," my mother said, her eyes on her phone. "We're terribly busy though. Your sister's new apartment needs work, and we're overseeing the renovations." We stayed for a week. A long, uncomfortable week. My parents were hardly ever home, always at my sister's new place. But my sister? She was always around, always watching, always there. I saw the way she looked at Marco. The flutter of her eyelashes, the coy smiles. It made my stomach churn. "Marco," she cooed one evening, "I'd love your opinion on the color scheme for my bedroom. Why don't you come up and take a look?" I saw the discomfort on Marco's face. "I don't think," he started, but I cut him off. "That's enough," I snapped at my sister. "He's my fiancé. Back off." Her face crumpled into a pout. "I was just being friendly," she whined. "God, Daisy, you're so selfish. You always want everything for yourself." She stormed off, no doubt to cry to our parents. And sure enough, not 10 minutes later, my mother was there, face like thunder. "How dare you speak to your sister that way," she hissed. "After all we've done for you." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "All you've done for me? That's a joke, right? You've done nothing but ignore me my entire life." But it was useless. In their eyes, I was always going to be the villain. The unwanted child who dared to want more. That night, as Marco and I lay in bed in a nearby hotel, because of course, my old room was now a home gym for my sister, I made a decision. "Let's go home," I said softly. "Back to Italy. This isn't my home anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. Marco pulled me close, his warmth a comfort in the cold reality of my family's indifference. "Okay," he said simply. "Let's go home." As we boarded the plane the next day, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief to be leaving the toxicity behind, sadness for the family I never really had. Back in Italy, life slowly returned to normal. Marco and I threw ourselves into wedding planning, determined to create the perfect day. But the visit home had left a bitter taste in my mouth, a reminder of all I'd left behind. "Are you sure about this?" Marco asked one evening as we sat on our balcony, the sun setting over the Tuscan hills. "Not inviting your sister, I mean." I took a sip of wine, letting the rich flavor roll over my tongue before answering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said finally. "After what happened. I can't have her there, Marco. I won't." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. What I didn't tell him was about the messages. The explicit, inappropriate messages my sister had been sending him on social media since we'd left. I'd seen them by accident one day when using his phone. He'd been too embarrassed, too kind to tell me. But I knew. And it was the final straw. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of cake tastings, venue visits, and dress fittings. Before I knew it, we were just weeks away from the big day. There was just one last thing to do. With a deep breath, I picked up the phone and dialed the number I still knew by heart, even after all these years. "Oh, Daisy, what is it?" "We're rather busy at the moment." My mother's voice, distracted as always. I swallowed hard, pushing down the hurt. "I'm calling about the wedding. I booked your flights and hotel. Everything's paid for. We'd love for you and Dad to come." There was a pause, then, "That's nice, dear, but what about your sister? We haven't received an invitation for her." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "She's not invited, Mom. After what happened during our visit, and the messages she's been sending Marco. I don't want her there." "Messages? What messages?" My mother's voice had an edge to it now. "The explicit ones, Mom. The ones she's been sending my fiancé. It's inappropriate and disrespectful. I won't have that drama at my wedding." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in my mother's head, trying to find a way to excuse my sister's behavior, to make me the bad guy once again. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your sister would never do such a thing. Daisy, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. For once in my life, I'm putting myself first. You and Dad are welcome to come. The flight details will be emailed to you. I hope you'll be there." She didn't say anything and just hung up. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and beautiful. Everything was perfect, the flowers, the music, the food. Everything except for the 2 empty seats in the front row. As the hours ticked by and guests began to arrive, a knot formed in my stomach. Where were they? Surely they couldn't do that to me. "Marco," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Can we delay the ceremony a bit? I need to make a call." His eyes filled with understanding and sympathy. "Of course, amore. Take all the time you need." With shaking hands, I dialed my mother's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Just as I was about to give up, there was a click. "Hello?" My mother's voice, groggy and irritated. "Mom, where are you? The wedding's about to start." There was a pause, then, "Daisy, do you have any idea what time it is here?" "We were sleeping. It's the middle of the night." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Sleeping? But the wedding. You were supposed to be here. I sent you the tickets, the hotel information, everything." "Oh, that." Her voice turned cold. "Well, we decided not to come. Your sister is having her housewarming party today. We couldn't miss that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her housewarming? But she's known about my wedding date for months. Why would she schedule it for today? Don't be selfish, Daisy. The world doesn't revolve around you. Besides, how could you expect us to go to one daughter's celebration and not the others? If you had invited your sister like you should have. Mom, I cut her off, my voice hard. You know why I didn't invite her? After what she did. That's all in your head, Daisy. Your sister would never do such a thing. You've always been jealous of her, always trying to make her look bad. I laughed, a bitter sound. Jealous? Is that what you think this is about? God, Mom, do you even hear yourself? Don't take that tone with me, young lady. This is your own fault. Your sister's party is none of my business, I finished for her. Just like my wedding is clearly none of yours. Goodbye, Mom. Enjoy the party. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. I looked at myself in the mirror, took a deep breath, and made a decision. And so, I walked down the aisle alone. No father to give me away, no mother to shed a tear. But as I looked at Marco, standing there with love shining in his eyes, I realized I didn't need them. I had everything I needed right here. Time has a way of healing wounds, or at least numbing them. Marco and I built a life together, full of love, laughter, and success. We'd both climbed the corporate ladder, our hard work paying off in promotions and accolades. We traveled, we made friends, we created a home. My parents never reached out. No congratulations on our wedding, no holiday greetings, nothing. And after a while, I stopped expecting them to. I stopped checking my phone on my birthday, stopped hoping for a Christmas card. It was easier that way. Then, on a random Tuesday in April, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a very familiar area code. My hometown. Hello? I answered, my heart pounding. Daisy, is that you? My mother's voice, sounding older, more tired than I remembered. Daisy, we need your help. And so the story came out. The company my parents had worked for, the one they'd sacrificed everything for, including their relationship with me, had gone bankrupt. They were out of work, with no savings to fall back on. We've always lived well, you know that, my mother said, a note of desperation in her voice. We know we haven't been good parents to you. But we need help, please. I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring inside me. Anger at their past treatment, satisfaction at their comeuppance, pity for their situation, and a small, traitorous spark of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment they'd finally see me, value me. Okay, I said finally. I'll help. How much do you need? The figure she named made me wince, but I could afford it. Marco and I had done well for ourselves, after all. I made the transfer immediately, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. It's done, I told her. The money should be in your account soon. Over the next few months, the pattern continued. Text messages would arrive, always asking for money. The amounts were smaller now, but the requests were frequent. And every time, like a fool, I sent the money. After one such transaction, Marco found me staring at my phone, a wry smile on my face. They asked for money again, he asked gently. I nodded. And again, I sent it. God, when did I become such a sucker? Marco sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You're not a sucker, amore. You're kind. It's not your fault they can't see what an amazing daughter they have. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when my world tilted on its axis once again. I was idly scrolling through Facebook, a cup of coffee in hand, when a photo stopped me cold. My parents, looking tanned and relaxed, cocktails in hand, lounging by a pool at what was clearly a very expensive resort. My hand shook as I clicked through more photos. There they were, dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Posing in front of a luxury spa. Living it up like they didn't have a care in the world. Like they hadn't been begging me for money for months. With a growing sense of dread, I navigated to my sister's page. What I saw there made my blood run cold. Photo after photo of her with a brand new sports car, at high-end bars, designer shopping bags piled around her. And the captions. Another amazing gift from the best parents in the world. Lucky me, only child. So blessed to have parents who would do anything for me. Spoiled and proud. And there, in the comments, were my parents. Liking every post. Commenting things like, nothing but the best for our little princess, and you deserve it all, sweetheart. I felt sick. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. How could they? How dare they? As if on cue, my phone started ringing. It was them. With a deep breath, I answered. Daisy, dear, my mother's voice dripped with fake sweetness. We were wondering when you might be sending the next transfer. Life's been so hard, you know. We're thinking of renovating the house, it's gotten so old and dreary. Something in me snapped. Hard? I've seen the photos, Mom. The resort, the restaurants, the gifts for my sister. How dare you? There was a pause, then my mother's voice turned cold. Now you listen here, we gave you life. I could have had an abortion, you know. But we chose to have you. You owe us everything. Now, about that money. I didn't let her finish. I hung up, my whole body shaking with rage and hurt. The phone immediately started ringing again. And again, and again. Text messages flooded in, alternating between guilt trips and demands. I turned the phone off. Over the next few weeks, my parents continued to call and message. Demanding money, then pleading, then threatening. I ignored it all. I blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, cut off every avenue they had to reach me. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of guilt. But every time I wavered, I remembered those photos, those comments. The cruel words my mother had spat at me. Years passed, and life continued to evolve. Marco and I had built a successful life in Europe, but something was calling us back to the States. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it was the desire to start a family of our own in familiar surroundings. Whatever the reason, we made the decision to return to my hometown. We quickly settled into our... Your sister made it out, but the house, it's gone, Daisy. Completely destroyed. I sat there, stunned. The house I grew up in, the site of so many conflicting memories, reduced to ashes because of my sister's carelessness. That's not even the worst part, my friend added. Turns out your parents let the insurance lapse. They've lost everything. A part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction, quickly followed by guilt for feeling that way. But mostly, I felt nothing. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. Life went on. Marco and I focused on our careers, our home, our future. Then, one sunny Saturday morning, a knock on the door changed everything. I opened it to find my parents standing there. They looked older, worn down. The designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair were gone, replaced by shabby, outdated outfits and graying, unkempt locks. Daisy, my mother said, her voice trembling. We need your help. I stood there, frozen, as they poured out their tale of woe. Living in a cramped, rented apartment. Struggling to make ends meet. No savings, no support from their own parents, unable to find work at their age. And your sister, my father added, his voice bitter. We asked to stay with her, in the apartment we bought her. She kicked us out. Said she didn't have room for old people. A part of me wanted to laugh at the irony. The golden child, turning on them just as they had turned on me. But the laugh died in my throat as I looked at their desperate faces. Please, Daisy, my mother pleaded. We have nowhere else to go. You're our only hope. For a moment, I was tempted. The little girl inside me, the one who had always craved their love and approval, wanted to throw open the door and welcome them in. But then, you owe us this, my mother said, her tone shifting from pleading to demanding. After all, I could have aborted you. You owe us your life. And just like that, the spell was broken. I felt a calm settle over me, a certainty I had never known before. No, I said, my voice steady and clear. I don't owe you anything. Not for giving birth to me, not for the years of neglect, not for choosing my sister over me time and time again. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Now, I'm asking you to leave. If you don't, I'll call the police. My father tried to step forward, but I stood my ground. I mean it, I said. Leave, now, and don't come back. They left, hurling insults and threats as they went. I closed the door, leaning against it as tears finally came. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of relief. Of closure. That night, I called my grandparents. They had always been there for me, even from a distance. They listened as I poured out the whole story, offering words of comfort and support. You did the right thing, Daisy, my grandmother said. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Especially those who wouldn't even notice if you burned. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The last ties to my toxic past had been severed. The future stretched out before me, bright and full of possibility.
Unfortunately, we've decided not to accept this prototype, so we're going to have to cancel the order. Huh. At that moment, Liam, was at a loss for what the representative had just said to me. I made a foolish sound in my confusion. What do you mean you don't want it? Just what I said, we don't need this machine, so we're canceling the order, Haga. No, but, when you say cancel, if you could just provide a reason. I said we're canceling, we don't need it anymore, so take it back, Haga. Alright, that's the end of that, Haga. The disrespectful tone and the clear mockery in their words left me momentarily stunned, followed quickly by a surge of anger. Are you really sure about this? You won't be able to take back these words. Haga, saying we don't need something means just that. Anyway, it's cancelled. So, that's that, Haga. The representative walked away without listening to me. I had always found this man disagreeable, but I never imagined he would go this far. Even so, I felt my anger boiling over, a sentiment shared by my colleagues at the company. Liam, let's go, get ready. If they're set on this, they need to be taught a lesson. Nah. Little did I know then, Johnson's actions would lead to serious consequences for the representative and his company. My name is Liam. I'm a typical guy in my 50s, working as an engineer for a precision machinery manufacturer. I joined the company as a fresh graduate and have been working here for 27 years. Our company's main business is to build custom machines for use in production lines for snacks, cosmetics, and the like, according to our clients' requests. I take on projects brought in by our salespeople. First, I work out the specifications with clients, and then I oversee the manufacturing and delivery process. My hobby was tinkering with machines, so I majored in mechanical engineering in college, where I also obtained a patent qualification. I thought having a patent would make things easier, but working showed me it's not such a sweet world after all. Over these 27 years, I've been molded by my superiors and seniors, learning the ropes and new technologies, day by day, to meet various client requests. Now, with the physical demands of age, it's tough, but being relied on as a veteran and cherished by other employees makes my work and daily life fulfilling. Amongst these days, however, I encountered an unbelievable person, leading to the incident at hand. I had no idea why someone so lacking in humanity was entrusted with the role of a transaction representative. The beginning of this incident was at Sugar Manufacturing, a company with which we had a long-standing relationship. On the day it all began, I was assigned a very large project and headed to the corporation for the transaction. That's when I encountered him. Hey there, I'm Oliver, your new contact at our company, looking forward to working with you. The man who I encountered was Oliver, about 20 years my junior. He was a young and fairly handsome man with an off-putting and casual demeanor. Oliver had taken over as the main contact for our usual transactions after the regular employee fell ill and was hospitalized. Though he was a graduate of a top university and clearly capable, his casual greeting left a bad taste in my mouth. But understanding that everyone has their circumstances, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and proceeded with the transaction. The bosses and seniors are also here to support, so if there's anything, just let us know. All right, let's give it our all. Cheers. Despite his informal farewell, I was determined to rely on his dynamism and committed to doing a good job. 3 or 4 months later, the day to check the first prototype arrived. We made sure everything, including the operation check, was in perfect order to complete the project as scheduled. I was supposed to bring the prototype to Sugar Manufacturing's workshop in Nebraska and have Oliver check it. Where's Oliver? Today was supposed to be the day for the prototype check. However, I felt something was off when Oliver wasn't at Sugar Manufacturing's workshop. Upon inquiring over the phone with an employee there, I was shocked to learn Oliver had been suddenly absent due to illness a week before. Though I thought it would have been courteous to inform us of his illness earlier, Oliver did show up the next day to perform the check at the workshop. Just when I thought things would finally move smoothly from here on out. Upon seeing the prototype, Oliver made a sour face and started nitpicking in a casual tone. The size of this prototype is different from what I was expecting. We plan to replace our current machine with this, but it'll leave too much space and look awkward. Hold on, during our meetings, you said a smaller size would be preferable, and specifically requested it. True, I did say that, but seeing the actual thing, it feels different, you know. Also, are there alternative parts to the ones used here? If so, I prefer those. Now hold on, you agreed that, considering your requirements, these parts were the most functional and cost-effective. In this manner, Oliver gave us roughly 20 vague instructions, and thus, the first prototype check was concluded. But it didn't end there. During the checks for the next prototypes, Oliver continued to give vague instructions about changing specifications, sizes, and parts. Amidst these unsettling developments, I witnessed something unbelievable. It was after another day of vague instructions, as I was leaving Sugar Manufacturing, pondering what to do about Oliver. This game app is hilarious. As I passed by a room that looked like an office, I heard Oliver's laughter. Peeking into the room, I saw Oliver playing on his smartphone during work hours. Several female co-workers of a similar age tried to intervene, but Oliver nonchalantly brushed them off and then proposed something unbelievable. Don't get so worked up, I'm doing my job, Hey, how about we all go for an Italian party at that restaurant after work today, Seeing Oliver laughing and making such an invitation, my head nearly went blank. Months later, as I was leaving Sugar Manufacturing, feeling downtrodden after another session filled with vague instructions, Oliver was questioned by his boss, who looked skeptical about the checks. Oliver, with a grin, gave a thumbs up to his boss's doubtful face. All good here, it's been a bit of a struggle dealing with an older guy. But thanks to the manager and guidance from the higher-ups, I'm handling it perfectly, yes. Despite the obvious lack of dedication and sloppy work, Oliver continued to talk big. That night, passing by a restaurant bar near the station, I saw Oliver with several women. Michelle, give me a lap pillow. Oh, found some buns here. Monica and Kristen, I'm gonna eat you up. Inside the restaurant bar, Oliver was enjoying lavish drinks and meals, engaging in indescribable activities with the women. Seeing Oliver's playboy antics firsthand disillusioned me, and I worried if we could really finish the job. Amid these concerns, I decided to consult Johnson. a senior colleague with whom I've had a long working relationship at the company. Johnson, a manager, was surprised by Oliver's behavior but listened to my story to the end. After listening, he crossed his arms and sighed deeply. I had no idea Oliver was such a careless person. We heard from Sugar Manufacturing that he was a top university graduate and competent at his job, but this certainly raises concerns. Exactly. Even recently, despite the numerous spec changes requiring additional quotes, he just brushed it off saying, "All good here. Is he really okay making decisions without upper management's approval?" It's possible he's been given full responsibility for the project, but for now, keep going as you have been. I'll talk to the sales department and the president about this. Johnson assured me with those words. Despite my unease, I persevered with the checks, specification changes, and rate estimations, continuing to work diligently as usual. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed. What was supposed to be a 1-year project had stretched this long because of our new, frivolous contact person. I hadn't anticipated this. Seeing the situation, Johnson, and after hearing from him, the sales team too, tried several times to discuss the deadlines with Oliver, but he always evasively assured us that things were fine. However, after 10 rounds of trial and error, and incorporating all our knowledge and patented technology into the prototype, Oliver's expression finally changed significantly. "Oliver, is there any problem with this?" No, nothing in particular." Oliver, with a somewhat breathless look, seemed to acknowledge the prototype machine. Whether he had acknowledged it or simply run out of complaints, his attitude was still non-committal. But eventually, he gave the okay, and we began manufacturing the actual machine. "I heard about it, Liam. Great job hanging in there. Tonight, we celebrate at the bar." "Thank you, but it was the result of everyone, including you, manager, lending their support. I couldn't have done it alone." Thus, the 3-year cat and mouse game with our frivolous contact person came to an end. Or so Johnson and I thought, just before tragedy struck. When I went to Sugar Manufacturing with the final specifications and estimate to meet Oliver, he dropped a bombshell. "Unfortunately, we've decided not to accept this prototype, so we're going to have to cancel the order." At first, I didn't understand what I was being told and let out a foolish sound. What do you mean you don't want it?" "Just what I said. We don't need this machine, so we're canceling the order." Haga. Oliver's dismissive, mocking tone threw me into confusion. Wait a minute, didn't we spend 3 years making this prototype because you needed it? How can you just cancel it without providing a detailed reason? Well, that's true, but a cancellation is a cancellation. We don't need it anymore, so take it back, Haga. Alright, that's the end of that, Haga. Again, being dismissed in such a mocking manner made my head go blank, followed by a surge of anger. Before I knew it, words of anger flowed from my mouth. "Are you really sure about this? You won't be able to take back these words." Haga, saying we don't need something means just that. Anyway, it's cancelled. So, that's that, Haga. Oliver walked away without listening to the end of my speech, laughing. I had always felt he was careless and unlikable, but I never imagined he would go this far. Feeling even more enraged, yet knowing I couldn't cause a scene at Sugar Manufacturing, I returned to the company with a heavy heart. Upon my arrival, Johnson and the team immediately noticed my state and rushed over. "Liam, what happened? Was there an issue at Sugar Manufacturing?" "I'm sorry, manager. The thing is..." I hesitated to speak but knew I couldn't keep silent, so I decided to tell them about Oliver's outrageous behavior. "What? To think Oliver would do something so absurd. Hold on, I'll check this right now." Johnson, visibly angered, immediately called Oliver. Oliver, what's this about canceling? I just heard from Liam. Could you explain the reason? Oliver's voice, coming through the speakerphone Johnson had turned on, sounded very annoyed. Huh, what do you mean? We just don't need it, so we cancelled it. So, what's the reason for the cancellation? Is it because you're dealing with another company? Given the amount of time we've devoted to your company, we'd like a satisfactory explanation. It's just circumstances. Does your company need to know all the internal affairs just to cancel? Anyway, a cancellation is a cancellation, that's it. Oliver hung up abruptly before Johnson could argue back. Not only Johnson, but the rest of the team also showed their anger at Oliver's flippant attitude. Then Johnson turned to me. Liam, I know you're tired, but get ready to go out. I'll be back from the president's office by then. What are you planning to do? It's obvious, isn't it? If he's determined to go through with this, then we need to make him understand. Now, get ready quickly. Yes, right away. Urged by Johnson's serious and angry tone, I hurried to prepare for departure. As soon as Johnson returned, the two of us set off to a location he had directed. From the events that unfolded at that location, I quickly grasped the meaning behind Johnson's words and farts. The next day, Oliver stormed into my company with a fury akin to a raid. Hey, where's that old man? Where did Liam go? Tell him to come out immediately. Upon arriving, Oliver began yelling at the receptionist in the lobby. Informed by an internal call for help from the receptionist, I immediately went down to the first floor to confront Oliver. So you finally showed up. What the hell did you do? Oliver, red-faced and breathing heavily, glared at me, but I wasn't intimidated or afraid. Knowing why he had barged in here, I was even less concerned. Thinking so, I kept my cool while facing Oliver. Well, starting off with quite the accusation. What do you mean by what did you do? Don't play dumb. You went to our rival company, Technoscience, for a deal, didn't you? And on top of that, you snitched to my company's president. Oliver's words made me immediately realize that Johnson's plan had worked. Indeed, on that day, Johnson had taken me to Technoscience, a rival of Sugar Manufacturing. Technoscience and our company had a transactional relationship, and having patented technology, I had often received their favor. Johnson decided to switch the deal to Technoscience and have them accept the prototype. Technoscience was very pleased with the prototype and agreed to a deal, wanting to utilize it. Regarding Oliver's accusation of snitching, it was more like Johnson had consulted with the president before heading to Technoscience. The president was shocked by Oliver's behavior and actions, including the refusal to accept a prototype, and became furious. What a disgrace! Our company has built its reputation on trust over 30 years, and to think Sugar Manufacturing would engage in such careless business practices. We will cease all transactions with Sugar Manufacturing immediately. Our company had been highly regarded by many clients, including Sugar Manufacturing and Technoscience, for its meticulous work over 30 years. However, Oliver's careless attitude and the refusal to accept a prototype threatened to tarnish our company's reputation. Your irresponsible behavior in this transaction and the outright refusal to accept a prototype have angered the president greatly. Thus, the change to a deal with Technoscience and the cancellation of the contract were inevitable. Upon hearing this, Oliver exploded in anger like a kettle boiling over. This is bullshit. I was just doing my job as I was told. Why does that warrant a transaction halt? Because of your damn president, I got disciplined and fired. After his outburst, Oliver shared the main reason he had barged in here. He explained what he had experienced at Sugar Manufacturing the day before. Oliver was suddenly called by the president of Sugar Manufacturing and was given a disciplinary dismissal. The reason was his arrogant behavior towards me during this transaction, and the responsibility for refusing the prototype. Oliver had caused several issues at Sugar Manufacturing due to his carelessness. But it turned out that one of the executives, his father, had helped him get the job through connections. Despite his father's influence and his credentials from a top university, Oliver's performance had prevented others from admonishing him too severely. However, this led Oliver to believe he could do as he pleased without consequences, which reflected in his behavior during this transaction. The refusal to accept a prototype was completely one-sided, simply because he disliked me, and he unabashedly stated, "I was just doing my job as told." This was the final straw for the president of Sugar Manufacturing, leading to Oliver's dismissal for causing the transaction to halt. Even his father, who had been a backbone for him, couldn't save him this time. His father too was disciplined and dismissed for allowing Oliver's misconduct. Regardless of the responsibility for mixing in defective products, getting our president angry enough to stop the transaction, and then being fired for misconduct is entirely your own doing. Perhaps this will teach you to start over and relearn everything for reemployment. What the hell, you just wait and see. With steam practically shooting out of his head again, Oliver finally lunged at me in a fit of rage. However, soon after the commotion began, several security guards who had rushed to the scene effortlessly subdued Oliver before he could lay a hand on me, and escorted him out to the public. Additionally, the security had alerted the police, and by the time he was taken outside, a patrol car had arrived. What followed was a scene straight out of a TV show, ending with Oliver being taken away by the police. "I won't forget that face of yours. Remember this, Liam." Before the patrol car drove away, Oliver, while being restrained by the police officers inside, managed to force his face out the window and left me with those parting words. Subsequently, the president of Sugar Manufacturing called our president, pleading for the resumption of business, explaining his firing of Oliver and his father for causing this monumental blunder. However, our president dismissed the notion that firing Oliver and his father would restore lost trust, firmly stating that the decision to cease all dealings remains unchanged before hanging up. Following that, Sugar Manufacturing fell into financial trouble due to the substantial damages claimed by our company, and the cancellations of projects triggered by this incident, leading to its inevitable bankruptcy. As for Oliver and his father, they were left with a huge debt from the damages, and further isolated by his mother's decision to disown them and file for divorce, plunging them into a life of poverty and utter isolation. Currently, they are living day to day, juggling multiple jobs to pay off debts and living expenses. Despite this, Oliver's pride remains intact, leading to a cycle of job changes and dismissals. Moreover, their constant blaming and loud arguments have caused complaints from the landlord and other tenants of their cheap apartment, hinting at an impending homelessness. As for me, I continue to enjoy a fulfilling life as a middle-aged professional, maintaining good relationships with Johnson and my other colleagues at work. While the 3 wasted years on Oliver do sting, I've chosen to view it as a lesson in sharpening my judgment and dealings with others. Reflecting on those 3 years as a learning expense, I vow to dedicate the remainder of my working years to the company and its future generations, ensuring such incidents don't recur. Approaching retirement, I believe there's still much I can offer, and even after leaving the company, that won't change. In essence, life doesn't end as long as you're alive. Believing in those words, I intend to live and strive each day as long as possible.
The situation has changed. We no longer need your screws. That's what I was told during the sudden call I received, right before the skyscraper's completion. Just as I was dealing with the call, the president of the contracting company canceled an order for screws worth $200,000. Meanwhile, my employees were busily loading the ordered screws onto a truck. Facing my hard-working employees, I wondered if the man on the phone lacked any semblance of a heart. Unable to bear it any longer, angered, I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. "If you want to cancel, then there's nothing we can do about it," I said, as I signaled my employees to halt and retreat. Everyone was stunned. If that's what the client wants, then that's what we have to do. Yes, we will have to take back all the screws. I led my employees towards the skyscraper. My name is Jin. I'm 48 years old and currently the president of a company that manufactures and processes screws and bolts. A business I inherited from my father. My company is blessed with skilled craftsmen, a solid support from the previous generation. For my team, I'm committed to pushing our sales every day. Among our clients, there are those who delay payments or complain about orders. When I first became president, it was tough, facing companies that would blatantly look down on us. Such attitudes can have a negative impact on our company's performance. Once you are seen as weak, it's over. I now understand the struggles my father used to talk about. My father must have worked hard to ensure his company wasn't just seen as a subcontractor. Determined not to be outdone by him, I honed my negotiation skills desperately. Careful responses and proactive negotiations. Identifying the root cause of problems and solving them immediately. Gradually, as I built a track record, trust and credibility grew, and our clients began to recognize me. Just when everything seemed to be on track, a new problem began to occur. It was a job request from one of our clients' president. "Hey, Jin, how's business? Sorry to bother you, but we urgently need some parts. Anything you have left over will do. Just send them our way." It was President Brown. A client since my father's time, who always seems to think it's okay to just ask for products off the cuff. He's a director at a construction company, having handled everything from single-family homes to skyscrapers. We had a good relationship since my father's era, but lately, it's been a source of concern. Again, Mr. President. This is the third request this month. The frequency is clearly increasing. What started as a few pieces has now become requests for more than a dozen at a time. No matter how you look at it, we can keep this up without jeopardizing our business. I'm sorry, President Brown, but I would like you to purchase them this time. I have employees to pay, and we need the sales for their sake. As a business owner responsible for my employees' livelihoods, I thought he would empathize with my situation. However, contrary to my expectations, the president gave a cold response. "Come on, after all the favoritism I've shown your company, you're saying this. What do your employees have to do with me? Sort it out yourself, or we'll cease doing business in the future." I could sense anger in his words. Despite what I thought was a good relationship, I never expected such a cold response. "So, does that mean you're also canceling our ongoing deal?" As much as I wanted to stand firm for my employees, a cancellation now would be problematic. Of course, it's not like we can find another company to work with if yours is going to be stingy. Actually, we currently have a construction project for a tower building. Thanks to this project, I've received an order from President Brown for screws worth about $200,000. This tower project is not only a great opportunity for significant revenue, but also an excellent chance to showcase our company's reliability and technical expertise. It would be disastrous if we stopped production now. Our company would go bankrupt. Please, anything but that. But it's true that I've become unable to stand up to the president who gave us this chance. Ever since he took on this construction project, I've felt his attitude grow more arrogant. He wouldn't have said such disrespectful things before. Then, as a sign of your sincerity, send the screws within this week. Neither of us can afford to fail. Let's continue to get along well. Being recognized by the public or within the industry is an honor for us, business owners. However, that doesn't mean we should neglect our clients. The president, who had become arrogant, continued to make unreasonable demands. About that skyscraper in downtown, we're short on craftsmen and in a bind. Didn't you say you have a few employees who can handle construction? Could you send them over? Our company does take on some construction management, but we haven't dealt with anything as large as skyscrapers. Right now, our employees are already working overtime daily for the screw production for the skyscraper. So sparing anyone is extremely difficult. Mr. President, the delivery is due soon, right? We're working at full speed to meet the deadline, so we really can't spare anyone. Not meeting the delivery and having the order canceled would be a problem. I was more nervous than ever, knowing we couldn't afford to fail. But the president didn't seem to care about my situation at all. It's fine if you can't deliver everything by the deadline. Just send them bit by bit. You should be able to arrange that much. You're a business owner, aren't you? Are your employees so incompetent that you can't even manage that? Why does it turn out this way? I don't understand how one can speak from such a high horse when asking for help. That's not the case. I'm just saying we can't spare any more manpower. You're struggling with a labor shortage too, right? I wish you could understand that. Honestly, I wish they wouldn't take unreasonable demands for granted. If we keep accepting everything, we'll never be able to say no in the future. Remembering my father's words, I pleaded with the president for understanding. But it seems like the president had no intention of understanding my position. I'm offering you a business opportunity. It's not that I'm in trouble due to a lack of personnel. At that moment, I was speechless. The sophistry was so blatant, I was left with my mouth agape. It made me question why I had been desperately maintaining this relationship. To think such a childish person is in charge of others as a business owner is shameful. To this president, anything that can be used will be used, merely a tool. Even among business owners, disregarding a partner's circumstances to this extent is despicable. Even so, are you planning to refuse? You can imagine what will happen if you upset me. The president, hinting at the worst possible outcome at this point, is nothing short of a villain. It's not a business opportunity. It feels more like he's threatening our livelihood with money. Faced with a choice, I was forced to make a bitter decision. Sending employees to work under the worst kind of manager was something I wanted to avoid, more so than having a $200,000 large order canceled. With the possibility of not knowing what they would be forced to do, the only option left was to nod an agreement. I decided to dispatch a few veterans to assist with the skyscraper construction. Of course, this would leave us short-staffed. But by delaying orders from other clients and helping out in the factory myself, I made an effort to produce things efficiently. The employees did their best. And as a result, despite the shortage of manpower, production progressed smoothly, and we were on track to meet the deadline. If everything continued this way, we would be able to complete the delivery successfully, and the skyscraper could be built. Just when I felt relieved, the worst possible turn of events was waiting for me. The situation has changed. We no longer need your screws. Just as the skyscraper was nearing completion, I received a sudden call, and the client company's president canceled an order worth $200,000 in screws. Even as I took the call, my employees were diligently loading screws onto a truck. Facing my hard-working staff, I wondered if the man on the phone lacked any semblance of a heart. Unable to tolerate his rashness any further, and angered, I decided to comply with his wish. If you want to cancel, then it can't be helped, I told my employees, signaling them to pack up and retreat. If that's what the client wants, then that's what we have to do. Yes, we will have to take back all of the screws. I led my employees towards the skyscraper, As expected, the president called the next day. I just got a call from the site. Some of the screws used in the skyscraper have been pulled out. Was this your doing? I could hear the panic in his voice, and I realized that my harassment had its effect. Yesterday, I had taken my employees to the skyscraper. We were there to retrieve our screws that had been canceled. Even if they were used, they were our valuable products. It was only natural to reclaim them. The whole situation was absurd. Canceling at the last minute is out of the question. Not only using our important products but also causing trouble in our business operations by nitpicking. And now canceling and voiding the contract, it's all utterly indefensible. Our employees were involved in the skyscraper's construction, so they knew exactly which screws to remove to barely maintain its structure. Unlike the employees hired by the client's president, ours are veterans through and through. Their top-notch construction skills made this feat passable. Do you realize what you're doing? Attach those screws back immediately, otherwise, we can't move on to the next phase. The president yelled, not considering others' feelings. I thought it served him right. So, does that mean you're canceling the cancellation? That would mean, in addition to the original $200,000, we'll need an additional $100,000 for the new request. The president on the phone was furious. I wish he'd understand that we're even more upset than he is. After all the exploitation we faced, and then to be given a sudden cancellation, it was unthinkable. Regardless of the business opportunity or how long we've been supported since my father's time. Disrespecting my employees and my company is a grave offense that I'll make him realize. Don't mess with me. How can I accept such a demand? Today, a president from a major corporation is coming for an inspection. If they see the state, it will be obvious we won't meet the deadline. We could go bankrupt. The president, clearly valuing this client greatly, showed his emotions as he demanded the screws be put back. The risk of bankruptcy is the same for us. If we get canceled and can't recoup the money, we might have to shut down. That's why we can back down. Then please transfer $100,000 upfront as a prepayment. Next, $200,000 for the manufacturing of the screws, and an additional $100,000 for the cancellation fee. That makes a total of $400,000, correct? I started to enjoy this as I raised the price. A voiceless scream could be heard from the other end of the phone. There couldn't be anything more enjoyable than this. You've doubled the price, haven't you? Enough is enough. Do you think you can do this and not pay a price? If you anger me, you'll regret it later. Finally, losing his patience, the president started making threats, but I remained completely unfazed. Thanks to a clever innovation by one of our employees, the president knew he couldn't place orders with any other company but ours. That's my line. The screws you ordered this time have been modified for high-rises. They can't be installed with screws from any other company. Even if there were an alternative, it wouldn't be guaranteed for durability, and above all, it's impossible to prepare screws that would cost $200,000 now. An employee who we sent to help the president had suggested a smart tweak to enhance the screw's strength. The employee was proud that our products were the only option. This gave us a bargaining chip. The screws are irreplaceable. The CEO was silenced by the fact that it had been revealed for the first time. He must have realized he was backed into a corner. It's hard to make out over the phone, but he's muttering under his breath. It seems like his hatred for me is spilling out. Also, an employee had brought me some information. The company that planned the construction of the high-rise building this time. I know their secret. An employee who went to help on site had heard it from other workers. Listen, this high-rise building construction is from White Construction, a well-known company, right? For your information, I happen to know the president, and I was thinking of reporting this matter to him. We've only exchanged business cards once, but it was enough for a bluff. The moment I revealed this fact, the CEO's demeanor changed drastically. You know President White, stop it, don't say anything unnecessary. White Construction is among the top companies in the construction industry. In particular, President White is known within the industry for being honorable and not tolerating any dishonesty. If a company engaged in malpractices or treated subcontractors poorly, he would not give them any work. From his reaction, it's clear that White Construction is an important client. Please, I beg you. It was my fault, so don't speak out. If we're abandoned by White Construction now, our company won't be able to survive. Suddenly becoming meek, the CEO's attitude change was all too convenient. After all the trouble he's caused my company, asking not to speak out doesn't cut it. Showing sincerity absolutely requires money. Listen, I don't particularly want an apology. If you truly feel sorry, then immediately transfer $400,000, then we can install the screws. $400,000. It's double the revenue, but considering what's been done to us until today, it's a small price to pay. Even under such conditions, the CEO promised to pay the money. As soon as the transfer was confirmed, I, along with my employees, headed towards the nearly completed high-rise to install the screws. After that, the construction of the high-rise resumed. President White visited for an inspection and was deeply moved seeing the nearly completed high-rise. Are these screws custom-made? I've never seen anything like them before. I want to know the details about these screws. Upon noticing the existence of the screws our company developed, President White made an appointment with my company to discuss the screws' capabilities. The president of the client company, having seen my screws being praised, was said to be visibly frustrated. Why focus on the screws? The high-rise I built is way more impressive, isn't it? Screws, of all things. Screws are just parts made by subcontractors. It must have been incredibly frustrating to have the interest of an important client taken by unknown screws rather than the construction of the high-rise itself. For President White, it seemed that he was more interested in screws and architectural technology than the high-rise itself. Being a president who originally worked on-site, his affection for parts must be immeasurable. I should never have commissioned your company. I will never request work from you again. Just go bankrupt already. After spitting out his lines full of frustration, the client's CEO hung up the phone. That turned out to be our last conversation. I felt a sense of relief and my mood lightened. Initially, I was thrilled to hear about this high-rise construction project. But when I saw the CEO's tyrannical methods, I regretted it. I'm the one who doesn't want to work with him ever again. Though he wished my company would fail, his misfortune continued. Subsequently, the completed high-rise faced scandals in parts other than the screws, ending up unsellable. It was an unexpected turn of events that left me astonished. After that, the client CEO's luck went downhill as if he was rolling down a slope. Following the scandal, there was an outpouring of grievances from other subcontractors. And when this news reached President White, it resulted in a loss of work. Told by subcontractors they would never take on his work again, the isolated president had no choice but to declare bankruptcy. Any company that disrespects subcontractors deserves to fail. Who do you think is working hard on the ground? It's each and every craftsman. Disregarding them is absolutely unacceptable. There was considerable anger over the scandal involving our former business partner. I remember hearing President White say he wanted to change the construction industry. Having come up from the field and facing hardships himself, he doesn't want others to endure the same feelings. Many companies agree with President White's humane principles, and it seems the industry will be led by such figures. In contrast, the fate of the abandoned president was dire. There are various reasons for a company's bankruptcy, but isolation beyond poor cash flow can be cited as one. Lost trust and credibility can never be regained. If you can maintain relationships with clients and employees, the CEO is merely a figurehead, and the company cannot survive. After bankruptcy, the CEO became a shadow of his former self. Abandoned by his family, he's reportedly now in a mental hospital. He's said to be muttering something to himself in bed. "I'm not at fault. I'm not the one to blame." Cut his shift to blaming others stem from having been in a privileged position. The idea that having subcontractors meant he was special, and to end up this way, is something I don't even want to imagine. The tragedy was too harsh for me to do anything but fall silent. I must be vigilant to ensure I don't end up like that. Now I understand why my dad was so obsessed with maintaining a credible image. To maintain oneself as a trustworthy person beyond money, one must not do anything to lower one's own status. Only at this age have I come to realize the greatness of what my father did. Truly, running a business is profound. Since then, I have started taking screw orders from White Construction. Thanks to this, not only did I secure a more stable income than before, but work also naturally started coming in from other companies. In these times of severe labor shortages, getting work is a blessing. But we are short on hands. Being able to expand a business like this and recruit talent is a matter of pride for any entrepreneur. Despite the hardships caused by that incident, I believe the outcome has been more rewarding. It was worth the struggle. Wanting to thank the employees who worked hard this time, I planned a trip to show my appreciation. It's because of them, who have been with us since my father's time, that this company stands. I couldn't have overcome these challenges alone. In today's world, it's tough to live by oneself, be it a company or an individual. I plan to continue working for their sake. Isn't that the duty of the second generation, taking over from my dad? Going forward, I aim to grow the company and hopefully turn it into a large corporation like President White someday. I feel like that would make for a proud report to my father in heaven.
I'm Sarah, and it all started when I met Tom in college. We were in different courses, but we hit it off right away. He was charming, funny, and damn good looking. We dated throughout college, and by the time graduation rolled around, we were head over heels in love. We got hitched right after graduation, and I was on cloud 9. My parents, Ellen and George, were loaded. They'd always given me everything I wanted, and my wedding was no exception. It was a fairy tale affair, white dress, fancy venue, the works. The first year of marriage was bliss. We were young, in love, and had the world at our feet. Tom had landed a great job at a marketing firm, and I was working as a teacher at a local elementary school. Life was good. Then, about a year after we got married, I found out I was pregnant. I was over the moon. His reaction wasn't quite what I expected. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I brushed off his lukewarm response, chalking it up to shock. I was sure he'd come around once the news sank in. 9 months later, our daughter Lily was born. She was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a set of lungs that could wake the dead. I was smitten. Tom, on the other hand, seemed overwhelmed. He'd hold Lily awkwardly, like she was a ticking time bomb. When she cried, which was often, he'd practically run from the room. "I thought we'd have more time, you know," he said one night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep. "To enjoy being married, travel, all that stuff." I tried to reassure him. "We can still do all that, Tom. It'll just be a little different with Lily." As the months went by, Tom started staying late at work more and more often. He'd come home after Lily was asleep, citing big projects and demanding clients. I wanted to believe him, but a nagging doubt started to grow in the pit of my stomach. Friday nights became guys' night for Tom. He'd go out with his work buddies, coming home in the wee hours of the morning, reeking of booze. "Keep that kid quiet, will you?" he'd snap when Lily's cries woke him up. "Some of us need to sleep." 3 years flew by in a blur of diapers, tantrums, and stolen moments of joy. Lily was now 3, a bundle of energy with her dad's green eyes and my stubborn chin. I'd gone back to work, and Lily had started kindergarten. We'd fallen into a routine, but it felt like Tom and I were just going through the motions. Then came the day that shattered what was left of our marriage. "I've got a business trip next week," Tom announced over dinner one night. "I'll be gone for 3 days." I nodded, used to his frequent trips by now. The day after Tom left, I got a frantic call from his mother, Martha. "Sarah, I'm at the hospital," she said, her voice shaky. "I had some chest pains. Could you let Tom know?" My heart raced. "Of course, Martha. I'll call him right away." But Tom wasn't answering his phone. After trying for hours, I started to worry. What if something had happened to him too? In desperation, I called his boss, Mike. Business trip Mike sounded confused. I didn't send Tom on any trip. My world tilted on its axis. If Tom wasn't on a business trip, where the hell was he? When he waltzed through the door 3 days later, whistling like he didn't have a care in the world, I was ready. "How was your trip?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Your mom's in the hospital, and your boss says he never sent you anywhere." The color drained from Tom's face. "Sarah, I can explain." "Save it," I spat. "Just tell me the truth for once. Are you cheating on me?" The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. "Her name's Amanda," Tom finally mumbled. "It's been going on for a while now." The divorce was ugly. Tom fought me on everything: the house, the car, even Lily's teddy bear, but the worst was when he refused to pay child support. "I'm not paying for a kid I never wanted," he snarled during one of our meetings. Something in me snapped. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "Keep your money. But I want you to sign away your parental rights. You clearly don't want to be a father, so make it official." To my shock, Tom didn't even hesitate. He signed the papers with a flourish, and just like that, he was out of our lives. The next 2 years were tough. Tom's parents, bless them, helped out with Lily and gave us money when they could, but being a single mom was harder than I'd ever imagined. Then, when Lily was 5, I met Jack. He was a widower with a daughter, Emma, who was a year younger than Lily. We bonded over playground meetups and PTA meetings, and before I knew it, I was falling in love again. We got married in a small ceremony, with Lily and Emma as our flower girls. Watching Jack with the girls, I felt hope blooming in my chest for the first time in years. As time passed, our little family grew closer. Lily started calling Jack Dad and Emma called me Mom. It felt right, like we were always meant to be together. 3 years after we got married, our son Max was born. Jack doted on all 3 kids equally, never distinguishing between his and mine. We were happy, really and truly happy. 20 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that Lily was a toddler, tottering around our living room. Now, at 25, she's a college graduate, engaged and planning her own wedding. Where did the time go? Lily's fiancé is a great guy. Jack and I both like him. He's kind, hardworking, and he clearly adores our daughter. When they announced their engagement, Jack opened a special account for Lily's wedding expenses and gave her full access. When we told Lily, she burst into tears and hugged us both. For weeks after that, our house was a flurry of wedding magazines, color swatches, and excited phone calls. Lily would burst through the door, bubbling over with news about venues, dresses, and floral arrangements. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe what we found," she'd exclaim, spreading photos across our kitchen table. "Isn't this centerpiece gorgeous?" Jack and I would nod and smile, caught up in her enthusiasm. It warmed my heart to see her so happy, to be part of this exciting time in her life. But then, things started to change. The visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter. At first, I chalked it up to wedding stress. Planning a wedding is no small feat, after all, but as the weeks went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Lily showed up unannounced. The moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. Her usual bright smile was gone, replaced by a tense, almost nervous expression. "Mom, I need to talk to you and..." "Jack," she said, stumbling over the name. My heart dropped. Jack, not Dad. In all the years since Jack had come into our lives, I'd never heard Lily call him anything but Dad. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let me get Jack." I found my husband in the garage tinkering with his latest project. One look at my face and he was on his feet, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etching his features. "It's Lily," I replied. "She wants to talk to us." "And Jack." "She called you Jack." I saw the hurt flash across his face before he schooled his expression into calm neutrality. He nodded, took my hand, and together we walked back into the house. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Jack and I sat down across from her, our hands still linked under the table. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. "All right, Lily," Jack said, his voice gentle despite the worry I could see in his eyes. "We're here. What did you want to talk about?" Lily took a deep breath, her eyes darting between Jack and me. "I met my biological father a couple of months ago. I was at Grandma Martha's and he showed up. We talked for hours. He's changed, Mom. He wants to make things right." I felt Jack stiffen beside me. "And what does this have to do with the wedding?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Lily's chin lifted, a stubborn set to her jaw that I recognized all too well. "He asked to walk me down the aisle, and I want him to." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the sound of Jack's heart breaking. "Lily," I said gently, "sweetheart, I know this is confusing. But Jack has been your dad since you were 5. Tom, he abandoned you. He signed away his rights." "He made a mistake," Lily's voice rose. "He's sorry now. He wants to fix things." Jack leaned forward, his face a mask of hurt and confusion. "Lily, I've raised you as my own for 20 years. I've been there for every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak. I thought I was your dad." "You are," Lily insisted, then faltered. "I mean, you're my stepdad and I love you. But Tom is my real father. It's my wedding, and I want him to walk me down the aisle." I saw the moment Jack's heart shattered. His face crumpled for a split second before he regained control. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've always considered you my daughter. Not my stepdaughter. My daughter." "Well, I'm not," Lily shouted, jumping to her feet. "You're my stepfather, not my real dad. This is my wedding, and I'll decide who walks me down the aisle." The front door slammed and Emma, Jack's biological daughter, rushed into the kitchen. "What's going on? Why is everyone yelling?" Close behind her was Max, our son, looking bewildered. "Mom? Dad? Lily?" I quickly filled them in, watching their faces change from confusion to anger. "How could you do this to Dad?" Emma demanded, glaring at Lily. "After everything he's done for you." Max nodded, his young face twisted with hurt. "Yeah, Lily. Dad's always treated us all the same. How can you say he's not your real dad?" Lily looked around wildly, her eyes filling with tears. "You don't understand. None of you understand." With that, she bolted from the house, the door slamming behind her. We all stood there in stunned silence. Jack's face was ashen, his eyes fixed on the spot where Lily had been standing. Emma moved to his side, wrapping an arm around him. Max joined them, and I watched as my family closed ranks around Jack. I moved to Jack's other side, taking his hand. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Where did I go wrong?" My heart broke for him. "For all of us. You didn't go wrong, Jack," I said firmly. "You've been the best father any of these kids could ask for. Lily's, I don't know what's gotten into her." As we stood there, our little family huddled together in the kitchen, I couldn't help but wonder how had things gone so wrong, and more importantly, how were we going to fix this? The days following Lily's bombshell announcement were tense. Jack and I kept expecting her to call, to apologize, to come to her senses. But the call never came. Instead, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends and family members sending me links, asking if I'd seen Lily's latest posts. With a heavy heart, I opened her social media page. There they were. Photos of Lily with Tom, both grinning at the camera. "So happy to reconnect with my real dad," the caption read. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. When I showed Jack, his face hardened. "That's it," he said, his voice low and controlled. "If she doesn't consider me her father anymore, I'm not paying for her wedding. I'm blocking her access to the wedding account. She's made her choice." I didn't argue. How could I when he looked so broken? A few days later, the other shoe dropped. Lily burst into our house like a hurricane, her face red with fury. "What the hell?" she screamed, not even bothering with a greeting. "Why can't I access the wedding account? How am I supposed to pay the vendors? The venue? The caterers?" "I'm sure your real father can help you out," Jack replied, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Since you've chosen him, it seems only right that he should foot the bill." Lily gaped at him, then turned to me. "Mom, you can't let him do this. Make him give me access to the account again." I shook my head slowly. "Lily, this is Jack's decision. And frankly, I agree with him." "What?" she shrieked. "How can you take his side? I'm your daughter." "And Jack is my husband," I replied firmly. "He's been more of a father to you than Tom ever was. You can't expect to hurt him like this and still have him pay for your wedding." Lily's face contorted with rage. "Fine," she spat. "If that's how it's going to be, then you need to make a choice, Mom. It's me or him. Your daughter or your husband. Choose." She stood there, chest heaving, clearly expecting me to cave. To choose her, my flesh and blood, over Jack. But in that moment, looking at her tantrum-throwing face, I didn't recognize my daughter at all. "I'm not choosing anyone, Lily," I said quietly. "I love you and I love Jack. But I agree with his decision. You're an adult now. If you want Tom to be your real father, then you need to deal with the consequences of that choice." Lily's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the little girl she used to be, the one who would run to Jack with skinned knees and bad dreams. Then her expression hardened again. "I hate you," she sobbed. "I hate both of you." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. A few days after Lily's dramatic exit, my phone buzzed again. Another social media notification. With a sense of dread, I opened it. There was Lily, beaming next to Tom. The caption read, "Thanks to my amazing dad for funding my dream wedding. It's going to be the event of the century. P.S. Sarah, Jack, and kids don't bother showing up. You're not invited." I showed Jack, who just shook his head sadly. Where did Tom suddenly get all this money, he wondered aloud. I shrugged. Who knows, maybe he won the lottery. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. We tried to put it out of our minds to focus on our life and our other kids. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A week later, there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Martha and George, Tom's parents, looking worried and frazzled. "Sarah, dear," Martha said, wringing her hands. "We need your help." I ushered them in, calling for Jack. Once we were all settled in the living room, George spoke up. "We got a call from the bank," he explained. "They're saying we've missed a loan payment. But we never took out a loan." The next day, I found myself at the bank with Martha and George, piecing together a disturbing puzzle. Tom, it turned out, had taken out a massive loan using forged documents. He'd made his parents unwitting co-signers. "I'm so sorry," the bank manager said, looking genuinely distressed. "But unless the loan is repaid, we'll have to start proceedings against Mr. and Mrs. Johnson." Martha burst into tears. George looked shell-shocked. "We'll figure this out," I assured them, even as my mind raced. How could Tom do this to his own parents? Back at home, I filled Jack in on everything. He listened, his face growing grimmer by the second. "We need to call the police," he said finally. "Tom's committed fraud. His parents shouldn't suffer for his crimes." I nodded, my heart heavy. Despite everything, I never wanted it to come to this. The next few days were a whirlwind. Police statements, bank meetings, more tears from Martha and George, and then, finally, the news we'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure: Tom had been arrested. As the details emerged, the full scope of Tom's deception became clear. He'd taken out the loan not just for Lily's wedding, but to impress a new girlfriend. He'd been living large on borrowed money and forged signatures. "The funds have been frozen," the detective informed us. we'll be seizing them as evidence. My thoughts immediately went to Lily. All that money she'd been bragging about, the lavish wedding she'd been planning, it was all gone. Fruits of a poison tree. That evening, as Jack and I sat on the porch, trying to process everything that had happened, my phone rang. It was Lily. "Mom," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Everything's ruined. The money's gone. The wedding's off. What am I going to do?" I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mix of emotions: sympathy, frustration, a tiny bit of vindication. But mostly I felt tired, so very tired. "I don't know, Lily," I said softly. "I really don't know." A few days after the phone call, Lily showed up at our doorstep. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the radiant bride-to-be she'd been just weeks ago. "Mom, Dad," she said, her voice small. I noticed she was calling Jack Dad again. "I need your help." We invited her in, sitting around the kitchen table where we'd had so many family discussions before. Jack's face was a mask of calm, but I could see the turmoil in his eyes. "The wedding's off unless we can find the money," Lily explained, her words tumbling out. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, can you help me? Can you give me the money for the wedding?" I glanced at Jack. His jaw was set, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to sweep in and fix everything, like he always had. But we both knew we couldn't do that this time. "Lily," I said gently, "we can't just give you the money. Not after everything that's happened." But Lily started to protest, but Jack cut her off. "We can't forgive you that quickly," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Actions have consequences, Lily. You made your choice, and now you have to deal with the fallout." Lily's face crumpled. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Ben is furious. He says I'm unstable, that I create drama. He's threatening to call off the engagement if we can't have the wedding we planned." My heart ached for her. Despite everything, she was still my little girl. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and make everything better, but I knew we couldn't. "Sweetheart," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. But this is a problem you created, and it's one you need to solve yourself." "We love you," Jack added, his voice thick with emotion. "But we can't bail you out of this. It wouldn't be right, and it wouldn't help you in the long run." Lily looked between us, realization dawning in her eyes. We weren't going to cave. We weren't going to fix this for her. "Fine," she spat, yanking her hand away from mine. "I'll figure it out myself. I don't need you. Either of you." She stormed out, leaving Jack and me sitting in stunned silence. Weeks passed. We heard through the grapevine that Lily and Ben had gotten married at the city hall, with just a handful of guests present. We weren't invited. The night we heard about the wedding, I found Jack sitting on the porch, staring into the distance. "I feel like I failed her," he said quietly as I sat down next to him. I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You didn't fail her, Jack. We raised her to be strong, independent, and responsible. Sometimes that means letting her face the consequences of her actions." "But what if we pushed her away for good?" he asked, his voice breaking. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "Every person in life faces situations where they have to make a choice," I said softly. "Sometimes those choices turn out to be wrong. That's what happened with Lily. But she's strong. She'll learn from this, and hopefully she'll find her way back to us." We sat there in silence, watching the sun set. Our family had been through a storm, and I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. But as I sat there with Jack, I felt a glimmer of hope. We'd weathered storms before. We'd weather this one too. 3 months after Lily's hasty City Hall wedding, I bumped into an old friend at the grocery store. As we caught up, she let slip something that made my heart skip a beat. "I heard Lily and Ben are having trouble," she said, lowering her voice. "Someone told me they're talking about divorce." I thanked her, my mind reeling. As soon as I got home, I filled Jack in. We debated for hours before finally deciding to reach out to Lily. To our surprise, she answered on the first ring. "Mom," her voice was small, reminding me of when she was little and had a nightmare. "Sweetheart," we heard. "Is everything okay?" There was a long pause, then a choked sob. "No, Mom. Nothing's okay." Jack and I invited her and Ben over. The next evening they sat across from us at the kitchen table, looking worn and defeated. "We can't stop fighting," Lily admitted, her eyes downcast. "Ben resents me for the wedding fiasco, for alienating all of you. His parents are furious that they weren't at the wedding." Ben nodded, looking miserable. "I love Lily, but I don't know if love is enough anymore." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Marriage isn't easy," I started. "God knows Jack and I have had our rough patches. But divorce, that's a big step. Are you sure you've tried everything?" Lily burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "For everything. Dad, Jack, I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I treated you. Mom, I'm sorry for trying to make you choose. I've ruined everything." Jack reached across the table, taking Lily's hand. "You haven't ruined everything, sweetheart. You made mistakes, yes, but we all do. Have you considered seeing a family therapist?" To our relief, they both nodded. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, for the first time in months. There were more tears, but also laughter, and by the time Lily and Ben left, I felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few months, Lily and Ben threw themselves into therapy. Jack and I even joined them for a session at the therapist's request. It was hard, dredging up old hurts and misunderstandings, but it was also healing. Slowly but surely we saw changes. Lily and Ben started looking at each other the way they used to. Family dinners became a regular thing again, filled with conversation and laughter instead of tension. One evening, as Jack and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily joined us. She snuggled up next to Jack like she used to when she was little. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for everything. You've always been my real dad, and I was an idiot to ever say otherwise." Jack hugged her tight, his eyes misty. "I love you, kiddo. Always have, always will." As for Tom, we heard through Martha and George that he'd received a suspended sentence for the fraud. Last we knew, he'd left town, hopefully to start fresh somewhere else. Life isn't perfect. Lily and Ben still have their struggles and our family is still healing. But as I sit here watching Jack and Lily chatting and laughing, I feel hopeful. We've weathered this storm, and I believe we've come out stronger for it. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about love, forgiveness, and sticking together even when things get tough. And by that definition, we are most definitely a family.